Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and I'm joined today by Peter Bailey in Israel. Our topic is Together is Better Than One. And Thomas Paine said, "It is not in numbers, but in unity that our great strength lies." And Peter and I are hoping to show you that as we go on with our program. Peter has been on my program before. He's an ex-South African, a successful businessman here. And he and his wife, Jeannie, left South Africa to join their sons in Israel in 2013. He's an author of 2 books. And the one is called The Men of Valor, the 40 soldiers who received Israel's highest award for bravery. It's the most fascinating book. And then the other book was Street Names of Israel, which is also fascinating. He's written many very interesting articles. He has a military background and is my favorite historian, to tell you the truth. He answers many of my questions on history and military. I first met Peter in 2017 when I went to Israel and met up with my Israeli daughter Shira, and we joined a tiyul, or a tour, an outing that he and Joel Klotnick had organized to go to Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan, named after our General Jan Smuts. Telford was honoring I think it was the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. Is that right? You're nodding your head. And there I met Philip Vales, General Smuts' great-grandson, who was an honored guest of Telford. And Peter, Jeannie, Philip and I have remained friends ever since. Philip has also been on my program often. We are related. We share an uncle, Yanni Smuts, and an aunt, Daphne Smuts. Welcome, Peter. How are you today?
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm well, thank you. Just very hot. It's pretty warm in Israel at the moment, unlike the weather you have in South Africa. I'm sitting under the air conditioner, so I'm quite comfortable.
Now, we're going to be discussing this Together is Better Than One, which is really the concept of holism, which is a concept that General Smuts actually gave the adjective to, which was holistic. And the term holism comes from the Greek word holos, which means whole. Now, what do you have to say about holism? What do you feel that holism? Actually, I know you're very interested in Jan Smuts' General Smuts' view on holism.
Sue, it's one of the things that really attracted me to Smuts is holism. Just before we get going on that, pardon me, Smuts is celebrated. I wrote a piece that's in the Friends of Zion Museum in Jerusalem, and Smuts is one of the Christian Zionists that is honored in the Friends of Zion Museum. And I wrote a piece there about Smuts, and in it I said that he bestrode the first half of the 20th century like a colossus. And yet, 70 years after his passing, he's completely forgotten as a politician or as a military genius in any of these things. But his legacy is that of a philosopher, the philosopher who expounded the theory of holism, and as a botanist who has grasses named after him. Absolutely. So it's very interesting that the holism, the philosophical part of his life, is what the world has remembered and is what has affected the world more than anything else.
And his article on his article on the religion of the mountain, also such a holistic concept there as well. And, you know, I think more and more lately I have been hearing people mentioning him, even if they have moved his statue in London and what have you. You know, he he still lives on very much in philosophy and in his terms of holism and how the world is interconnected.
Absolutely, no question. His theories on holism were tied up with evolution, of course, with Darwinism. But they're deeply philosophical, and they embrace all humanity. And they were developed to include the existence of any form of life or nature whatsoever. Even, he wrote, for example, that no atom can exist in isolation. It has to join with another atom. One of the examples he gave was that if you have hydrogen and you have oxygen, individually they're not much use to anybody. Join them together and you've got water, which is one of the absolute essentials of the world. And that joining oxygen and hydrogen is holism.
Absolutely. And it's a perspective on the human condition that actually looks at the mind, the body, the individuals, society, and the environment, and how we each define one another. And we only have to look at what's going on around the world today, in the Middle East and in Europe, everywhere actually, and we realize how this does define one another. All of this together, the society, the environment, the body, the individuals. And anthropology even says that holism tries to integrate all that is known about human beings and their activities. But it's definitely a great appeal, but a very hard thing to live through with. Don't you find that?
Yeah, very, very much so. The whole theory of holism, Smuts' belief in holism, was deeply philosophical. And I have no pretensions to being a philosopher or even understanding the deeper philosophical elements of holism. I rather look at his very simplistic way of saying that nothing can live in isolation. And that, to me, is the essence of holism. It was what drove Smuts initially to the establishment of the Union of South Africa. 4 provinces in isolation could never achieve what the Union of South Africa, the 4 provinces brought together with his theory of holism, could achieve. Interesting for me, the motto of the Union of South Africa, ex unitate vires, out of unity comes strength.
Wow.
Holism.
It is holism. And it's also that saying that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely. That's and as the lady that coined the phrase "together is better than one" was Helen Keller.
Oh, was it really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I did a bit of research on that because it fascinated me. Now, nobody, I think, could understand that together is better than one than somebody like Helen Keller with her disability.
Absolutely. How amazing. Gee whiz. Peter, so with General, just going back to how we met with General Smuts, before that, I actually just wanted to say that, I think there are many things that have shaped out all of our lives. And if we look back, we can sort of see as we age, we can kind of look at the holistic aspect of the people, the environments, the cultures that have come into our lives and made up the whole that becomes us. And we often have to realize we mustn't be too fixed in that. We've got to be pretty, I was looking at lavender in the garden and there were some bees there. And I thought there of how it was working, all of them together, the bees making the honey, the lavender blooming, and, the whole holistic environment of nature and how it works. And, and I thought to myself, the bees will sting us if they want to, and hurt us. And this is what happens, I think, with human beings. This, instead of coming together, we actually damage each other.
There's no shadow of doubt about that. You were saying about...
Can we get back to that in a minute? Just keep that thought.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and I'm joined today by Peter Bailey in Israel. And I actually have a surprise for you, Peter. You're going to be listening to a message from Philip Vayers coming through to us from Brisbane. Thank you, Craig.
Good morning from Brisbane, Sue and Peter. Sue, my very dear aangetrouwde niggie, and Peter, my very dear friend of must be 30 years, who is also a highly accomplished historian. I calculated that we are separated from each other in total by a bit more than 35,000 kilometers. But for all the immense geographical distance, which represents 88% of the Earth's circumference, we are so close in so many ways. Family, enormously appreciated friendships, and of course the convictions that I, as an anglicized Presbyterian Boersian, share with you, my Jewish sister and my Jewish brother. I'm delighted and fascinated that you'll be talking about holism this morning. I have in a carton somewhere a 1926 first edition print of Holism and Evolution, inscribed Aan liefste Mama van Papa. This was the Obaas's gift of the very first published volume to Amos Smuts. If memory serves, I have tried valiantly to read Holism and Evolution on at least half a dozen occasions, and cannot recall progressing past page 10. Somehow everything just starts escaping me and going straight over my head at that stage. I have read that Einstein once said that the two most significant human concepts of the 20th century were relativity and holism, that despite searching I've not been able to trace that source again. We are often, amusingly I think, reminded of holism by its rather loose use in daily life, where, for example, Buster Animal Feeds will profess to take a holistic approach to how they formulate dog food. I look forward very much to listening to you, Sue and Peter, all the way from Brisbane. And thank you for, again, remembering the Obaas, keeping him in our minds. And I am, as ever, so very grateful to you. All the best to you both, and lots of love. Bye.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program. I'm joined by Peter Bailey in Israel, and you've just been listening to a message by Philip Vayers. I will send it on to you, Peter. And Philip is General Smuts' great-grandson, and as he says, he's a Boer Christian, and he's a good friend to Peter and I. And Philip was saying that Einstein said one of the greatest things in this century was relativity and holism. And you were actually about to talk about, when I said to you about the bee hurting us and how humans forget and hurt each other, and you were going to say something.
See, what I was going to say is that the world to me currently is back in the 1930s. And as you say, the bee hurts when it wants to defend itself. It doesn't just hurt because it wishes to hurt. That's, of course, where humans are different to the animal world and the insect world. Humans will inflict hurt and pain for the sake of inflicting hurt and pain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is so true.
That's the huge difference. Now, the 1930s, we had in the United States Charles Lindbergh leading a movement called America First. Today we have a gentleman called Donald Trump, and what's he shouting? America First. Mm. Charles Lindbergh was very much in favor of the Nazification of Germany, the Nazification of Europe. In Britain we had the Mosleyites, and they were also very much in favor of the Nazi way of life. But what bound them all together was anti-Semitism. Mm. And what's binding the left, the right, all sorts of strange groupings together in the world today is anti-Semitism.
It really is. Mm.
Totally opposed to holism, of course. The 1930s, they say the hour bringeth the man. I just hope that the world is going to produce somebody of the qualities of a Smuts and a Churchill, a Roosevelt, that can put an end to all these things.
Absolutely. I must admit, Peter, I do sometimes feel great despair when I look at the leaders of the world. And, you know, you mentioned how the anti-Semitism, and I read somewhere that it said, remember, it didn't start with gas chambers. It started with politicians dividing the people with us versus them. It started with intolerance and hate speech. And when people stopped caring and became desensitized and turned a blind eye, the gas chambers were well on their way to killing millions of Jews and others.
Absolutely. That, of course, brings me back to Jan Smuts and holism. This belief of his in holism that people working together for the good of the world can make the world a better place. So he was informed and pushed for the establishment of the League of Nations.
Tell me about the League of Nations.
Pardon?
Tell me about the League of Nations.
The League of Nations, after the First World War, Smuts and Woodrow Wilson were very much in sync on a philosophical level, and they both believed that the world had to unite. The countries of the world had to have a common forum where they could discuss their problems rather than resorting to military conflict. And that was the League of Nations. Bring everybody together in a holistic atmosphere and talk about your problems. Don't fight about your problems.
Wonderful concept, isn't it?
Unfortunately, Smuts, the idealist, was unable to maybe he did understand or he didn't factor in the fact that human nature very much doesn't allow for the complete theory of holism, that we can all work together. There's always somebody that wants to be the top dog. And I believe like Hitler, for example, while Hitler was the ultimate anti-Semite, did he merely use anti-Semitism as a means of achieving power, or was he dedicated to the killing of the Jewish people? And to me, that's a subtle difference between the situation then and the situation now. The people that are in control, a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood crowd, the jihadist crowd, they are bent on killing Jews. They are bent on destroying the state of Israel and killing the Jews that live in Israel. It's not a question of achieving power, it's blatant hatred.
And it's taught, unfortunately. It's taught in schools, and we've seen it being in the UNRWA schools, and I'm finding it incredibly upsetting, I must admit, very difficult. And then I do think of people like Martin Luther King, who changed so much just but not by violence. And Craig, that was actually to tell me to read an advert, but it was a bit late. You know what? So Martin Luther King never burnt one building, he never robbed one store, and never destroyed one town. Now, I mean, that we certainly can't say about the mobs today who are attacking synagogues and churches and everything else. And, you know, he had a very much a holistic view of the world, and his vision of a beloved community under another holistic declaration. And in a real sense, he said, life is interrelated. But we don't have a Martin Luther King at the moment, and we don't have a Nelson Mandela, who in his forgiveness, in his way of forgiving, was able to unite our country for a short while.
Yeah, very short while, unfortunately. Another person that you might mention in the same context as Martin Luther King is Mahatma Gandhi, who also never suggested violence, was totally anti-violent, and yet Gandhi and Smuts never got on.
Yeah. Until you remember the story of the sandals. Do you know that story about Gandhi's sandals? Gandhi gave, when he left South Africa, he gave Smuts his pair of sandals. and Smuts gave them back to him eventually with a note to say, that a great man walked, that Gandhi, a great man walked in these shoes. I can't remember the exact words, but Smuts gave great recognition to Gandhi as a fellow compatriot and, somebody who wanted peace. I was thinking about Israel and holism there. And I read a story on one of the beauty of the Jewish nation, I think it is. And I was thinking about caring for each other, working together towards a holistic way. And I came across this. It says that Noah, who was a combat soldier in the IDF, got onto a public bus in Israel and sat next to the driver. They chatted and she shared a bit about her missions. She also mentioned that she had just left the field and hadn't had a chance to eat yet. So she was looking forward to getting home to eat. The driver immediately pulled over next to a restaurant, took money from his pocket, and he told her, "There will be no hungry soldiers on my bus. With everything you do for the country, it's the least I can do for you. Now go and get yourself something to eat." The whole bus waited while Noah went to grab some food. And she posted a picture of herself and asked people to please share this story and to celebrate the kind driver. Now that, to me, is such an incredibly healing gesture, a gesture of coming together, of recognizing each other's strengths.
Absolutely. And another little bus story that I must, in a similar vein.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Philip Veyes is going to love this little story. I decided, when Philip was here, I decided to take him on a bus from Hod HaSharon, where we live, to Tel Aviv. I said the bus journey is an experience. You see things differently from the bus.
You do.
We sat in the two front seats, sort of next to the driver. And as we were driving, I was saying to Philip, this is whatever, we're passing this now. And then the bus driver said, "Are you a tourist?" And Philip said, "Yes." And I explained to him that he was here for the Balfour Centenary and who Philip was. And the bus driver said, "You keep quiet, and I'm going to give him a tour all the way to Tel Aviv."
Yes.
He proceeded to tell Philip about everything that we were driving along and driving past, loud enough for the whole bus to hear. And
how wonderful.
Spellbound in this bus. And when we got to our destination, we got off and everybody clapped. And
isn't that wonderful? What a lovely story.
Typical Israel. So,
it really is.
I'm sure Philip must be smiling now. But to get back to Smuts, and I want to talk about this Smuts and Zionism, which was one of the very important elements in his life. And Zionism, in fact, was part of Smuts's holism. And I was reading something very interesting about a year ago, where this chap put forward the theory that Smuts's belief in holism led him to believe, together with his Christianity and his knowledge of history, that the Jewish people, and it's written in the Balfour Declaration, which he helped to write, the Jewish people have a biblical and historical right to the land of Israel, to Palestine, as it then was. However, they also had to take their place in the nations of the world. And unless they had their own land, they couldn't take their place as one of the nations of the world. And that is what informed Smuts's Zionism. The belief that the Jews had to find and fill their place and take their place among the nations of the world, living in a diaspora that was never going to happen. And therefore they had to come back to their historic and biblical home, which was then Palestine.
Wow. And now tell me about the kibbutz Ramat Yochanan. I remember it so well. What a beautiful kibbutz. You know what I do remember also? Going into that cafeteria there and seeing there were a whole lot of Arab workers and Israeli workers, and they were all sitting together having a lunch or whatever they were having at the time. And I remember thinking then, and even saying to my daughter, to Shira, how wonderful it was to see the Arabs and the Jews all together. And they were all working together also when we went to go around the fields and the dairy.
A perfect example of apartheid Israel. That's all I can say.
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
that you all live together. Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan was originally called Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan Smuts.
Oh, yeah.
Because Yochanan you say to people, who was Yochanan? Nobody knows. Now, when you write Smuts in Hebrew and you read it in Yiddish, it reads as Smuts, Schmutz. It's dirt.
Right.
And the kibbutz residents complained and said, we cannot live in a kibbutz that is named Yochanan Dirt. And that's why the Schmutz part, and it remained as Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan.
Oh, that's so funny. What about the streets that are named after General Smuts?
Well, there's two of them. One in Jerusalem is Smuts Boulevard and Jan Smuts Avenue in Tel Aviv.
Oh, so they've kept the Smuts there.
They've kept Jan Smuts, yes.
Yeah,
A couple of years ago, there's a very well-known historian and journalist, Gil Troy. I don't know if the name he writes quite a lot in the Jerusalem Post. And he's an American. And he did an article in the Jerusalem Post saying it's time for this chap, Jan Smuts, his name to be removed from the street and to be replaced with that of Senator Patrick Moynihan.
Oh, wow.
Who was responsible originally for Jerusalem, for their vote in the American Senate to move the embassy to Jerusalem, the American embassy, which of course never happened. And I wrote a stinging article in reply, which the editor of the Jerusalem Post was very happy to publish, and it created controversy. And I said, this is what Smuts did for the Jewish people and for Israel. Whatever Patrick Moynihan did just pales into insignificance. And Gil Troy phoned me and he apologized.
Is that so?
A week later, he went to South Africa. He was the keynote speaker at the Zionist Congress that year. The South African Zionist Federation meeting.
Yeah.
To me, I'm so grateful to you because I might have embarrassed myself and I didn't know about Smuts and what he had done.
Wow, is that so? Now,
so that's a little bit about the Smuts Street part. Everything always comes together. And then Smuts and Judaism, holism and Judaism. It's another favorite hobby of mine.
And his friendship with Weissman. You also have a eulogy that I wanted you to read out, but we're just going to an ad break.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program. My guest today is Peter Bailey in Israel, and we're talking about Together is Better Than One. We're talking about holism and many other subjects, General Smuts and his role in the actually forming holism, saying what it was, the holistic name, giving the adjective as holistic as well. You can SMS us on 34519 or you can telegram us on 061 895 1019. Peter, you were about to talk about holism and Judaism, holism and religion, were you? And Judaism.
Yes. Well, you mentioned Weizmann.
Yes.
Smuts met Weizmann in 1917 when he went to the UK, to Britain, to join the British War Cabinet. Weizmann was a scientist, and they met, and they immediately gelled. First of all, Smuts's belief in Zionism attracted Weizmann, who probably thought, I can use this man. He believes in Zionism. He's involved with the government. He can help me push the Jewish homeland in Palestine. And he's quite right, because Smuts was a very, very willing accomplice, more than willing accomplice. But they had something else in common as well. They were both scientists. This was really the binding force between the two of them. They had a love of science, Smuts in 1931, it's not known by many, was made the honorary president of the British Institute of Science.
Oh, I never knew that.
So he was highly considered as a scientist, and he came up with a lot of scientific theories. I think Philip said relativity and holism were the two big things of the 20th century.
Right. That's what Einstein said.
Yeah, or Einstein said, but I think that holism eclipsed relativity.
Okay, so you eclipsed Einstein, Peter Bailey.
Yeah. That's my opinion. I hope Einstein doesn't mind.
You know,
come back to Zionism, to holism and Judaism. The very basic fact that 10 Jews have to be together to have a service is holism. One man on his own can't practice Judaism the way it should be practiced on a communal level. Needs 10 men. And that is holism at its very, very simplest form. But if we go a little bit deeper, and we look at Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot. And what do we do at Sukkot? We have our etrogim and our lulavim. Now, the four species, obviously, are the etrog, the palm, the myrtle, and the willow. The lulav is the palm, but sometimes all four together also referred to as the lulav, because it's the most prominent. That's what you see on the lulav. But the four elements of the lulav, the etrog has got smell and it has got taste. Others have got smell with no taste. The willow has got no taste or no smell. So you need all these elements together to make the whole. And I'll just read this out. Taste represents learning. Smell represents good deeds. The etrog has both taste and smell. The lulav or palm has taste but no fragrance. The myrtle has a smell. The palm and the willow has neither. It's got neither smell nor taste. Each represents a different type of man. Some have both learning and good deeds. Some have one without the other, and some have neither. Real community is found in bringing all these different men together, or different people together with all their different qualities. And that is the essence of holism and the essence of Judaism.
It really is. And, you know, you sent a thing that the Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had said, that Israel has taken a barren land and made it bloom again. It's taken an ancient language, the Hebrew of the Bible, and made it speak again. It's taken the West's oldest faith and made it young again. It's taken a tattered, shattered nation and made it live again. Israel is a country whose national anthem, Hatikvah, means hope. Israel is the home of hope. And in that statement alone, that hope encompasses everybody who makes Israel a whole. And, there's no ways that the desert could have bloomed again without people coming together, without all the elements coming together to make it bloom again.
What can I say?
Yeah.
That is Israel.
And Peter, you had a eulogy that you mentioned to me about that was delivered by the Cape Town Chief Rabbi Abrams at the time of Smuts's passing.
Yes.
What did he say?
Well, Chief Rabbi, to give him his official title, Chief Rabbi Professor Israel Abrams of Cape Town, delivered the tribute to Smuts at his passing. This was organized by the South African Jewish Ex-Service League, and I'm very proud to say that I was an honor to say that I was the national chairman of the Jewish Ex-Service League for several years before making Aliyah. And Philip sent me this speech, which I'd never heard. Philip sent it to me some time ago. And amongst the things he said, on this occasion, it is not unfitting to recall his services to the Jewish people and to make mention of Kfar Yochanan, the settlement in Israel bearing his name. which will remain an abiding, living memorial to the spirit of Jan Smuts. General Smuts was a lifelong Zionist. He was not only one of the framers of the Balfour Declaration, but consistently championed the cause of Jewish national restoration as an act of international justice and honor. And that's something that's been forgotten in the world today.
Wow.
My work for Zionism, Smuts said, has from the very first been a labor of love and gratitude. The services of the small Jewish people to humanity have been incomparably great. And our Western civilization today lives largely on the visions of the Hebrew prophets and seers. That such people should continue exiles from their ancient homeland throughout the ages was an historic anomaly and injustice which called for reparation. And he prophesied that the national home will be built anew. And so that was Smuts's view on Israel, informed his Zionism, and really...
and it came very much from his very strong Christian background.
Yes, there's a theory that the early Afrikaners, particularly in the 19th century, lived by the Bible.
Right.
When they say they lived by the Bible, it was the Tanakh, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses.
Right.
And not just the later Testament, which informed Christianity. But they were very much informed by the Torah and by the Tanakh, kings and the prophets and all that. And this is what informed Smuts. This was the basis of his knowledge of the Jewish people.
And we're going to ad break, but just before we do, I just want to add that in South Africa, we have so many Christian Zionists. And thank goodness, so many of the churches, especially the black churches, they are very pro-Israel. So, which is, really a big plus for us here in South Africa. Okay, thank you, Craig.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program. We're running out of time very quickly, as we always do, Peter. We've now got a very short YouTube by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs on hope. Thank you, Craig.
There was a former Marxist, once professor of Marxist thought at the University of Moscow, who became religious, Christian. His name was Nikolai Berdyaev. He said beautiful things about Jews, but he did say in one respect, Jews got it wrong. They believed there can be justice down here on earth, and we Christians know that there can only be justice up there in heaven. To be a Jew is to believe obstinately and insistently that you can have justice down here on earth. And that is why so many Jews became lawyers fighting injustice. Most of Nelson Mandela's lawyers were Jewish. They became economists fighting poverty. They became medical experts fighting disease. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope down here in the here and now, making life just a little better, making the world that is just a little closer to the world that ought to be.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and we're running out of time, but I'm with Peter Bailey, and that was Rabbi Jonathan Sachs on hope. And how do you feel about Israel's future? You can tell us in a few words. Is there hope?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no doubt whatsoever. I think it was Kennedy. I'm not sure of the quote. Kennedy said words to the effect, John F. Kennedy, that Israel wasn't created to disappear.
Right, absolutely.
Israel was created to become a light unto the nations.
And can you see the holism in the Middle East actually becoming something that we can live by in peace?
A little quote. Holism applied to humanity encompasses physical, mental, and emotional well-being, while Judaism adds the importance and necessity of spiritual well-being.
Okay.
Right. The world cannot exist without spiritual well-being.
And do you see that happening eventually?
Eventually, yes. I have no doubt that we will prevail. There was a very interesting interview with a member of the Hamas hierarchy. I don't know if you saw this. And the interview on TV, I can send the clip to you, said to this chap, "You are firing so many thousands of rockets at Israel, and yet you're doing so little damage." And this guy replied to him very seriously, "The problem is that the God of the Jews moves the targets and changes the direction of the rockets."
I did read that, right.
Now,
and I hope.
Now, to me, that says it all. And that is why we are going to prevail and why we are going to exist for the future, and we are going to win this battle.
And please God, we can have peace with our Arab neighbors. The Abraham Accords can start up again. And let's just pray that holism actually does come into being. And I would like to end with this. Mother Teresa said, "I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together we can do great things together." We're going to end after this is when this program is finished. Please stay online and you can listen to Simon Sinek's song, "Together is Better Than One," which is what started Philip and I on this talk today. Thank you, Philip, for being with me. What?
I said Peter, not Philip.
Sorry, Philip, I'm sure you're on the line as well. So thank you, Peter. It's so lovely seeing you. And thank goodness you got a sense of humor about your name being muddled. Fortunately, you like your brother, your brother Philip. Thank you. And
thank you so much, Sue, for inviting me onto your show. I've really enjoyed the morning, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed the morning.
I'm sure they have. And the next thing we're going to be discussing is why you feel this war actually started, this massacre on the 7th of October, what led up to it. And we will discuss that probably at another date.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'll get to that.
Give my love to Jeannie.
I will. Thank you, Sue.
Thanks. Bye.